So we are, where are we up to? We're up to the Mishnah. We're trying to make some progress. Make some progress here, as we said, in order to hopefully on target, finish the parak. Let's go. It says the Mishnah, person is not allowed to plant a tree next to his friend's field, unless you're 4 amos away. And this applies whether it's vines, whether it's any tree, it doesn't make a difference. You have to be 4 amos away. And the reason is very simple, because a tree doesn't exist on an island. You have to work the tree, you have to plow around it, you have to work the land around it. So you need some space around your tree, because otherwise you're going to end up going into his property to, prepare the soil and whatever you need to do. Avoda so'elon, basically, it's called, or whatever. Sorry, what was that?
Well, you're worrying about the roots or the branch?
Not so much. This one is not so much about the roots. This is the 4 amos here. It seems to be, The Mishnah says, whether it's vines or whether it's any tree. Generally, we express this often in the context of vines. It's Kedei Avodas HaKerem, it's called, right? A kerem, a vineyard, is assumed that it needs a kind of 4 amos around it in order to work, whatever, and you look after the vines and that type of thing. So yes, but this is but that it's brought in Kilayim. Avodas HaKerem is brought in Kilayim in the context of that's used as a measure for Kilayim as well, right? But that's not. I don't think that's what we refer to here. Here is just so you don't end up encroaching into his field. If there was a wall in between, they can both put their things next to their crops, or whatever they're growing, or the trees are next to the wall. There's no problem. There's no problem to go right up to the wall. But if there were roots going into friend's field, Mamik Gimel Tfachim, so the owner of the field that they've gone into is allowed to go down, sort of to remove them up to a depth of 3 Tfachim, the roots. Others going to affect and cause problems for his plowing. Basically, you could say, well, it's not how can you do that? How can you remove the roots? The roots are going to damage my trees. The response is, if I don't remove those roots, I can't possibly plow my field. So I've got 3 tefachim soil where I'm allowed to remove the roots. What will happen to the tree? Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll grow roots deeper, whatever. But you're allowed to remove the roots in the first, the top 3 tefachim. If he was digging a pit, or these different types of pits and trenches and things like that, so then he's allowed to cut down, and it seems descend. It seems to descend however far he wants in that case. I'll have to see. I think in the Gemora, but I think it's. I think you can go when it says Kod Seitz V'Yored. It's obviously deeper than 3 Tfachim, because we're talking about a pit here. And then you can keep. And then the wood belongs to him. There's a question who the wood belongs to. It's not clear. The wood belongs to whom? It's not right. It's not exactly clear who the wood belongs to. It can belong to. It could mean Eitzim Shalom could belong to the person who owns the field, or it could belong to the person who owns the tree, the other side. So the Gemora will talk about that. So
overhang of a tree.
Yeah.
You're not considering it.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're not talking about the overhang of the tree. That doesn't seem to come in. Pardon?
You can overhang someone.
Doesn't seem to be a problem here in terms of overhanging, but it doesn't. That doesn't. Don't seem to be concerned about that here, because that's not going to obstruct his usage of the field. That doesn't seem to be our concern here. Okay. Says Rashi. Yeah.
Same idea, but with the walls.
Yes.
So you have to distance the walls. And that was because of damage to the walls. Why didn't we talk about access?
Access to.
Have access to. We didn't say that last time.
Right. So you mean access? You mean he's got to have access here to be able to. Well, we're not.
Mishnah could have dealt with 2 birds with 1 stone last time.
Right. When you say, but when we talk about access, you mean he's got to be able to plow his field in his own. He's got to be. One guy wants space to plow his field, and the other one wants space to work the trees. You have to, the trees be far enough away. They don't hurt you, hurt the other field. You don't have to go into the other on the other thing, right? When we talk about beforehand, we didn't talk so much about access, did we? We talked about just about the damage, didn't we? That was really what we were focusing on. No, I mean it was kind of a different, yeah. Why were we only concerned about damage there?
Or why weren't we concerned about the access there?
Yes, yeah. Yeah. Although there we were much further away anyway, because there we were talking about how far away you have to go in order to, when you first position the tree, you have to be far enough away that the tree's roots are not going to damage the other guy's pit. Here we're saying if they're already the roots are already there, how do you get rid of the root? Are you allowed to get rid of the roots? So it's kind of a different focus here. Where the roots are there, what are you allowed to remove? Yeah. Let's see Rashi. Rashi says, whether it's a field that's growing crops or whether it's a field that's growing trees. The reason is so the amount that it takes to plow the vineyard, when he plows his trees, around his trees, he won't need to bring his plow into his friend's field. The Bala Soda, the owner of the field that the roots have gone into, he's allowed to sort of deepen them. In other words, sort of push them down 3 tefachim deeper, or perhaps even effectively remove them. Now the Rashash puts this next bit and says it's all one Rashi. That Kotset is not going on Kotsets in the Mishnah. Yeah, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. You know, if you're digging a trench, then you can go deeper than 3 tefach, right? So the way to read this is one Rashi. The Baal Hasoda, the owner of the field that the roots have gone into, can be Kotsets ba'omek gimel tefachim, is allowed to cut the roots to a depth of 3 tefachim. That makes much more sense. You understand? He says it's just one Rashi. Yeah, you're allowed to cut down to a depth of 3 tefachim.
There's no wall, so I'm not clear.
When there's no rules, the walls. Well, no, there might be a wall. Doesn't make a difference. The roots are going under the wall. So the wall. What the wall does is the wall enables you to plant your vineyard right up to the boundary. Why? Because the whole concern is you might end up bringing your plow into other guy's field. Well, if there's a wall there, you won't.
We learned in the first Gemora, if the wall breaks, you can force them to build it.
To rebuild the wall. So yeah, that's all to do with Kilayim. Which Tosfos seems to deal with a little bit here. So he says that Rashi earlier on brought a proof from here that when there's a wall, there's no problem of Kilayim. That, you know, specifically that's a proof from here. That's why we're not worried.
Then why would you dig down 3 tefachim? That's what I'm asking.
Oh, you don't need to. You just have a right to. I don't know if that's the conclusion about Kilayim, but that's what he seems to imply at the beginning anyway. But leaving aside Kilayim, the purpose of the wall here, for our interests, right, is that allows you to go right up to the wall, because you won't end up pushing your plow into the other guy's field because you can't, because there's a wall there. Then the roots will go under the wall, okay? But that's okay, that's fine, in the sense that if the roots go under the wall, you're still going to have to. If he wants to plow his field, he's allowed to do that,
Right.
and therefore he's allowed to remove those roots. That basically, yeah. Again, it is a bit confusing, but again, the previous mission was all about where, with a pit there, right? You know, you've got a tree and you've got a pit, and you've got how far away does the tree have to be from the pit? It's going to damage the wall. We're not talking about that here. We're talking about a guy who's got a field that he plows and grows crops or whatever, and the other guy's wants to have trees in his field. That's what we're discussing, right? If he then decides to dig a pit, it's fine. He can cut down, and that's it. He's allowed to go down. But there are such ways. The Gemora doesn't explain who the wood belongs to.
If there's no wall,
Yeah.
you're saying the Michelin's thing has to be 4 hours away.
If there's no wall.
Yeah, he can't go up to the boundary.
If there's no wall, then he has to leave. Exactly.
Right, but if the neighbour can cut down the roots or push them down anyway, what difference does the wall make? Why does it matter?
Well, no, if the neighbour, what do you mean? The wall is, there's two things. The wall allows him to put the trees right up to the boundary, but the roots may still grow next door. So the other guy wants to know, well, that's going to prevent me plowing my field. So Chazal say, no, you're allowed to remove roots up to a depth of 3 tefachim.
But you can do that even if there's no wall.
Yeah, that's nothing to do with the wall.
So there's
That's nothing to do with the wall. They're two
That's
separate
what I'm
things.
trying to say, so I can't see the reason why you want to be is it 4 amos or 4 tefachim? 4 amos.
4 amos.
4 amos away.
No, well, because there may be no wall. If there's no wall there for whatever reason, he doesn't want to
Yeah,
have a
but
wall.
it's making a difference. You can remove the roots either way. You can always
It's nothing to do with the roots. The trees need to be 4 amos
so you
away,
can't work,
so that he's got space to work the vineyard.
And if there's a wall there, you can't do it anymore.
If there's wall there, we're not worried about that because he's not going to be able to go into the other guy's field because the wall's there, basically. Yeah.
Right.
Says the Gemara, it's establishing what the reason for the 4 amos is. So that's the amount of space you need to work the vineyard. Omar Shmuel, Shmuel says this only applies in Eretz Yisrael. Aval Bovel shtei amos. In Bovel, it's enough to have 2 amos. He doesn't explain why. Rashi says 2 words. Shemachrishosan katsara. They have shorter plows. This is just a factual thing. Accept it. We don't argue. Apparently, that was the facts on the ground. In Bovel, they used shorter plows, and because they used shorter plows, it was enough to have 2 amos because there wasn't a concern that they would go into the next door neighbor's field. Same thing in the Brisa. A person is not allowed to plant a tree next to his friend's field. Unless he's 2 amos away. So we learn the Mishnah 4 amos. The way to resolve this must be like Shmuel says. There's a difference between Bovel and Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is 4 amos. In Bovel is 2 amos. Shramana, it's a good proof. And a third way of looking at it. Some ask there's a question. It's now the Mishnah says, our Mishnah says you have to be 4 amos away. Well, Tanya, the Brisa says, Shtei amos, 2 amos. Shmuel resolved it by saying, Lo kasha, it's no problem. Kan b'Bovel, kan b'Eretz Yisrael. One is in Bovel and one is in Eretz Yisrael. Fine. Now, Gemora brings a couple of stories. Rava bar of Chanan about this halacha. Ahavale hanu dikli, a mitzvah de pardisa de Rav Yosef. So Rava bar of Chanan had palm trees on the boundary of the orchard of Rav Yosef. That was how it was. Yeah, could have been that there was a wall there and therefore they were next to it, whatever, those are the facts. Birds came along and sat in the palm trees, and they flew down into the orchard, and they started destroying the whatever he was growing. He was growing grapes, I think. Yeah, grapes, yes, we'll see it, yeah. He was growing grapes, right? So Amalei, he turned around to him and he said, Amalei Rav Yosef, this is zilkotes. Go and chop down the trees. Rav Yosef turns around to his neighbor, Rabbi Barachana, look what's happening. Because you have those trees there, the birds are going to eating all my grapes. Amalei said to him, Varachikili, I did what I was supposed to do. I did the 4 amos, not my problem. Mishnah says, as long as you're 4 amos away, you're fine. I planted my trees 4 amos away. What's more? That's not what I need to do. Amalei said to him, that's only 4 amos away from other trees. If there's grapes there, you're going to be further than that. The Mishnah says, not like you. The Mishnah says, whether it's grapes or whether it's any tree. He says, not so fast. Amalei said to him, that's where it's a tree to a tree, like a palm tree to other palm trees next door, or vines to other vines next door. Because really, the Mishnah says you have to be 4 amos away, and it just says whether gefanim, whether vines, or any tree. It doesn't kind of specify, who's got the vines, who's got the trees, right? You understand? He says, you know what the Mishnah means? The Mishnah means if I have vines and you have vines, or I have trees, palm trees here being date palms, right? And you've got date palms, that's the amount of space you need. Aval ilon legefanim. But if you've got trees, which is what you have, right? You've got trees, date palms, and I've got vines, that means no, then it's a bigger amount. Why? Because then there's another concern. You understand? He deflects the question from the Mishnah and says, the Mishnah was only talking, as Rashi explained, the amount of space you need 4 amos to work the land. But if the setup is such where there's going to be a different problem, like here, where because you've got tall palm trees, birds descending from the palm trees, 4 amos is not very much, like the length of the table, it's not far away at all. They're descending from the palm trees into the vines. That's not fair. You've got to be further away than that.
But the Mishnah's talking about a field next to trees.
Not necessarily. It seems to be understanding that it is next to a field, and that's why Rashi specifically said on the Mishnah, it doesn't make a difference what's in the field. It could be crops, it could be trees. It covers every eventuality. What he's doing here,
Should count it double
for what?
for trees to grapes.
Because there's another problem. Rav Yosef says you've misunderstood the Mishnah. The Mishnah was telling you 4 amos, only because he doesn't even say double. He says just further, just however far you need to be away, so you don't damage my crop, so the birds don't damage my grapes. Right? He says don't quote the Mishnah at me. He says the Mishnah was talking about a scenario where this concern didn't apply. Let's say we both got vines, so there's no birds flying from vine to vine or whatever. Why? I don't know why. It seems to be birds just nest in the trees and they just.
This is a very indirect thing.
Yeah. It's a bit indirect.
Therefore, what the birds choose to do is not really Reb Chama's.
Yeah. So Tosfos deals with your problem. Just 1 second. Let's make sure everyone understands the case first. Yeah. The way Rav Yosef deflects the Mishnah, because he's being quoted the Mishnah. Rav Chanan starts off this argument in a very strong position. He says, I've done what I was told to do. The Mishnah told me, when you plant your trees, make sure you leave yourself 4 amos to work the land. I did that. Well, you're coming along with questions, trees, birds. I don't care about birds and trees. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Right? That's how it's done. So he's in a strong position. Rav Yosef says you've misunderstood the Mishnah. The Mishnah wasn't covering every eventuality. The Mishnah was only covering the problems that can arise through having to elbow your combine harvester or whatever fancy thing you're using to work the land into my field, because there's no wall there, so it needs a turning circle or whatever it is. So you need a space next to the whatever you're growing to make sure you don't go into my field. That was all the Mishnah was talking about. But if there's a new problem of hezek, such as here, there's a new damage being caused, such as birds coming down from trees and eating grapes, then the Mishnah wouldn't talk about that case. You've got to be further. That's what Yosef says.
This entire Mishnah is irrelevant to what he's talking about.
Yes. He's saying this. He's saying the scenario that we have here was not covered by the Mishnah.
Even if the Mishnah also says that there's a wall between, then it's not a problem. Even if it's
again, because it was only talking about that problem of the.
He's saying the Mishnah is not.
He's saying yes, not regular in this case. That's right. He's saying it's a different, well, not a different law of damage. It's just an additional problem that the Mishnah can't cover every eventuality, right? So he's saying there's a new scenario here. This was, he says take the principle. That's what Yosef says. Take the principle of the Mishnah. Don't look at the actual rule. He says, look at the principle. What's the principle? The principle is you have to make sure you don't the stuff you're growing doesn't cause harm to me, or the birds are causing a problem for me because of your trees. Right? That's the problem. Yeah. There's a problem, right? Now Jeremy has another problem, and his problem is that's indirect. So that Tosfos says it's one line Tosfos. It is the second last Tosfos, literally just one line. Dibra Maschal Avol. So he says, you see that? Avol b'gefanim boitzvei, with the grapes in your mouth. That's when you planted the palm trees when they're already high. You bought them, you can buy these big trees like from Home Base. Do they still do that? Fully grown trees, right? You buy a palm tree, okay? And you plant it. If you plant a seed, low, because then it grows of its own accord, and it's not his arrows. If you buy a tree, I suppose it's almost like you're buying the tree with the birds in, or not quite, and that is a problem. And that is a problem. Yeah.
And the assumption also is that the birds would not be picking at Rabbi Yosef's vine, but for the trees being there for them to rest.
Rav Yosef would
say Rabbi Yosef is basically saying because of your tree.
Yes, because of your tree.
The birds could jolly well peck each
They could, but they seem to gather because of this. They seem to gather because of this. It's a the dove. Well, the dove that they have to. You have to. Well, the dovecot we talk about damage. No, well.
The dovecot is where the animal.
They come from there. You mean that's right. Yeah, they associate themselves with the. I've got very faint pencil note here on this Mishnah from a number of years ago. Must have been a long time ago. Where basically, Rabbi Birnbaum wrote a sefer called Ayelas HaShachar. His abbreviations of his name, Arya Aaron Yehuda Leib. So Ayela, Ayela Sashachar. Anyway, in that sefer, he explains that Tosfos understands that the damage is at the time of planting. That's the time. That's the hezek. Okay, and therefore, right, and therefore, and therefore, the Rabbi Yossi holds you have to distance. Rabbi Yossi holds, and that seems to be why here, if you plant it at that time, then you won't be. It seems to be it's not going to be a problem. So okay, can't really read it. Anyway, so that's how Tosfos deals with this problem. That's how Tosfos deals with this problem. Now he's got a fascinating response to him. Look at this. Amalei, he said to him, "Anon lo kaitzana." Hold on a second, you're telling me to chop down a fruit tree? I'm not chopping down a fruit tree. Brilliant, isn't it? Isn't that a brilliant answer?
No.
He's being caught in a corner. Yeah, that's what he says. You're telling me to chop down a fruit tree? How can you do that? You call yourself a rabbi. To Omar Rav. Yeah, that's what he says back. Omar Rav. Rav said, "Hi dikla to toin kaba osala mikasye." You have a palm tree. If it holds a kav worth of dates, you're not allowed to chop it down. Rabbi Chanina, and even worse, he says, Rabbi Chanina said, he said that his son, whose name was Shichas, did not only die because he cut down a fig tree below Zimne at the wrong time. You want to chop down the tree? Chop down the tree. You want to take that responsibility for chopping down a fruit tree? He said to him, so you take that responsibility. That's interesting, because who asked me this? Someone asked this question about chopping down fruit trees on the previous Mishnah. Someone asked this question about why we're not bothered about that.
I think
What?
I think I may have done last week. Yeah. I think I did last week.
You were claim ownership of the question. That's right. Absolutely. There you are. So I couldn't remember who it was. Right. Thank you. So basically, we had to. Why don't we are? We should have had that problem in the past. Tosfos says, and we got it. And the Brisa says this whole thing we had before. You cut it down, you pay money. He says you can talk about. You have to say You can say it's talking about there where it was an ilon srak, basically a barren tree. That was the story. It's a barren tree. But there are other cases. He brings other problems. Because there's a Gemora in Bava Kama which talks about palm trees that were weakening the taste of the grapes on a vine. And it says, and he said to him, "You're allowed to chop them down." Right, so you see, you're allowed to chop down a tree. He says, right, palm tree if it's weakening, causing hazard to vines. So he says there is different because there it was causing, it was weakening yosemidai more than a huge amount until you could actually taste. You could almost taste the wine in the palm trees. Anyway, so therefore that it seems to be there are certain cases where the level of damage that's being caused is so great that therefore you can chop down the tree, right? For the fruit-bearing tree. Here, he said to him, "This is not. I'm not taking responsibility for that, and therefore you will have to chop it down." Pardon?
Yosef have to pay the cost of the trees if you chop them down.
So we said, what about this tree? About what? Who wins the argument?
There are no winners and losers.
No. It's a fair question. Let's have a look very quickly. Where is it? It's in Kuf Nun Hey Chofei. That's why I keep it so far, right? Kuf Nun Hey Chofei. 1 second. Yeah. Because I think the halacha is like Rav Yosef. No, not Rav Yosef. Yes, Rav Yosef. Yes. But he's left in a bit of an awkward position, the way the Gemara concludes the argument, right? Because he doesn't really know, is he going to want to take that responsibility to chop down the tree and... Is it Kuf?
You could have told him to put nets in.
To stop animals. Shulchan says, "Misha says stechaver into a gefanim if a person's field was planted with vines or shalonos, other trees. Bohul interpret sechsadeu gefanim sad gefanim elonos sadilonos." and he's going to plant in his own tree other vines, so it's vines facing vines or trees facing trees. You have to be far away. The needs of the plow, as we've learnt. But if there's no need, he says to plow, Jesus, you don't need to distance at all. If there's no need to plow. Okay, fine, he talks about another case there. Now the Shulchan Aruch carries on, but when it's supplied by Eretz Yisrael, Chutz La'aretz Marchik Ben Gefan Mekfana Ben Los Lonos Shtei Amos. All the Gemara, right? Chutz La'aretz, it's not the same. He says not just Babel, Chutz La'aretz, it's only 2 amos, right? A Ben Gefanim B'Shari Lonos, between vines to other trees, it says 4 amos. He just says 4 amos, or to other trees, or to a field growing crops is 4 amos. That's what Shulchan Aruch says. The Ramah says v'yesh omrim to bring gefanim le'ilonos between vines and trees. Hadas. You have to estimate how far you need to be away, so that the birds don't fly. So they can't fly in one swoop from the trees to the vines. That's the Torah. This is that Tosfos. If you planted the sapling and then it grew, then it's not your problem. It's not your problem. Okay, then he talks about selling and things like that. Yeah, and he says in any place, finishes off, in any cases, if there's a wall in between, you can go right up to the wall. So it's interesting. Anyway, it does. There are more paskins. Well, it just brings a few different opinions. It's very complicated. Because by the time you get to the Shulchan Aruch, there's been a whole massive conversation in the Rishonim, so as to what. But the Ramah brings that opinion, and certainly as a Yesh Omrim, he brings that opinion, which says you got to work it out. You got to work out if you make sure the birds can't fly down into the trees.
I'm saying, if you haven't done that, are you then? You're then liable for your trees to be cut down, and are you therefore entitled to damages?
So we learned before that if the tree had a right to be there and it's private between 2 individuals, you're entitled to claim compensation. That's what we learned, right? You might have to cut down the tree, but you're entitled to compensation. Here, it doesn't mention that, but that was only if the tree was there first. And actually, no, we said if the tree was first, you don't cut it down at all. But here, that's not the case clearly, because here he planted next to him, so he planted without permission. He's allowed to remove the tree. No, so maybe he doesn't have to pay. No, he said to God, it might be different. That's the only thing. Previous Mishnah said if the pit was there first, you cut down the trees and you got to pay. That's what we said, right? And you got to pay. But maybe here, don't know whether here is worse. Here it's more than just planting the tree in the wrong place, and then the roots growing. Here you actually put it in. Here you didn't even leave any space for you to work the land. Yeah, it's not entirely clear whether you'd have to find compensation or not. Yeah. Okay, let's carry on. Rav Papa, next story. Havalehanu Dikli Amitzur the Rav Huna Berei Rav Yeshua. Rav Papa had palm trees on the border of Rav Huna Berei the Rav Yeshua, son of Yeshua. Azal Ashkechei. He went and found him. He was digging and he was cutting the roots. Amalei my high. What are you doing? What are you chopping the roots for? Yeah. Amalei said to him, the Mishnah says, I'm doing what the Mishnah says. The roots are going into your field. You're allowed to go 3 tefachim down, so it doesn't prevent the plowing. Amalei said to him, that's only 3 tefachim. You're digging much more than 3 tefachim. You're not allowed to do that. Amalei said to him, I am digging pits. The Mishnah says, you can cut further down, and the wood belongs to him. What that means, we'll have to clarify still. But either way, you can cut certainly deeper than 3 tefachim. Omar Papa says, Omri lei, I said to him, Kuli. I said to him, Amri mekulu. Basically, I brought him lots of proofs that he wasn't allowed to do this. Velo yochili lei. I could not overcome him. It was not possible to beat the argument of Huna Berei Yeshua ad Omri lei until I brought the following argument against him, and I said to him, Hod Amar Rav Yehuda. I brought the statement of Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says, a border that has been taken hold of by the public. That means to say, not necessarily a border, but it means basically a place where they made they've got a road the public are using, or a pathway or whatever. Yeah, that's what it means. Osir lekalkaloi, you're not allowed to mess it up. Now, this means even if it's a private road, it could be a private pathway. If the public are using that, almost like what they call it, public bridle way, public right of way. It could be a private land, but you've got right of way. Public are using that as a right of way. You have this all over the country, right? You're a public right of way. Then you can't touch it. So the argument he made from here was, which seems to have been his knockout blow against Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua, was, might as well. I have got chazaka. I've got an assumed use to be able to have my roots growing into this field in this way, and there's nothing you can do about it.
It's bizarre logic.
You think, yes, it's bizarre because you're saying, how can you bring a proof from public to private? That's the problem.
The boundary is not causing any harm. The boundary divider is not causing any harm.
What do you mean the boundary divider?
He's saying, look, if you build a boundary divider to stop, give a public right of way, you can't touch it.
No, it's not just a boundary divider. I think it's the phrase uses a boundary divider.
But it's not causing harm. There's no harm by just putting a fence up.
No, but if you remove the way they've got, the route they've got, then you will be damaging the public. And they have got, once the public have been using a certain route, you can't touch it. That's right.
Yeah, but I'm saying there's no harm.
Harm caused by who?
These roots are causing harm.
To who?
To the other guy. He said.
Well, there could be harm.
Going into the
no, there could be harm. There could be, you could have a pathway through your field, through a right of way that the public have been using, and all of a sudden someone decides to set up Glastonbury in the field next door. So suddenly your right of way through your field is the only access point to a music festival, 100,000 people. And suddenly you've got 100,000 people going to your field. It could be a huge amount of harm. But it's a public right of way. They've got right to use it. Don't touch it. I'm giving you an extreme example, but I'm saying there could definitely be harm in the usage.
The whole point of the roots
is
that the roots are causing potential harm to the plough. A real and present danger to the plough.
That's right. He's not the ploughing. No, he's the ploughing. He wants to dig a pit. He wants to dig a pit. Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua lives next to Rav Papa. Rav Papa has roots growing into Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua's field. One day, Rav Papa gets up in the morning and sees Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua with a massive digger. And he says to him, only 3 tvachim. Just do me a favor. It's not 3 tvachim. I can see. If it was 3 tvachim, it would be a little shovel. I can see that you're going much deeper 3 tvachim. He says, yes, because I'm digging a pit. And Rav Papa says to him, what do you mean you're digging a pit? I have a right to use that land because they are the roots of my tree and they are established here for a long time. Just like the public have a right to use a right of way because they've been using it for a long time. Now, there's a problem. That's the argument he makes. There's a problem. He jumped from private to public. We'll come to that in a second. I don't know. The Mishnah. Okay, yeah, all right. Well, hold on a second. Let's see what he says. Now, Lebasa de Nofer, after he left, after Paul went out, Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua said to himself, he said, why? I had a response to this as well. Why didn't I say to him, that that basically this argument that you have a chazaka, to use the space, to use the space where the roots are, so that you're not allowed to remove them. That's only within a 16 amma radius of the tree. But once it's beyond 16 ammas, and that seems to have been the scenario here, okay, it was outside 16 ammas away from the tree, that no chazaka applies. Why is that? Because the roots of a tree can go a long way. We'll see later, there's a whole sugya later on about, they can go 25 ammas, they can go very far, but they only draw nourishment up to 16 ammas. How do we know that? That's, I think the Gemora is going to talk about, whatever, but that's how it is, right? 16 amma radius around the tree, that's how far the roots draw nourishment, even if they go a bit further than that, but it's not relevant to the nourishment of the tree. And this was outside 16 hours. Outside 16 hours, I should be able to do what I like. That was his argument. He didn't respond to that, so he missed the boat. But that's what he should have said. That's what he says he should have said. Let's do Rashi, and then we'll just deal with these, try and see if we can deal with the problems. Rashi's on the previous Omid. Pardisa is a Kerem. Only a few Rashis there right at the end. Barachikili. We should run after him.
That was his counter. Why wouldn't the Gemora say his counter was 16 others?
Well, it was a real.
Well,
it was a real argument, but he didn't argue it when he should have.
Yeah, but we've still got the counter argument now. So why is it relevant whether he mentioned it at the time or it came out?
Well, maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it isn't. Maybe he could. Maybe he then did go up to him and then actually argue it and therefore carry on digging. That might have happened. They were still neighbors, right? So he could have met him the next day and said to him,
"That's not some unusual logic."
Yes, you're right. We're recounting a dialogue that goes on between them. Yeah, there must be a reason why it's recounted in that way. Really, these are two neighbors. He can make the argument the next day. It's not. It doesn't have to be then and there. It's still a useful point to make.
We don't know anything else
from the fact that.
The fact that he said I could have said it, I didn't. So
I'm sure we do. Not sure exactly what it is, but I mean, it seems to be that. Yeah, I don't know. Proper seems to be the senior player here. If that makes sense. Yeah. No, because all I'm saying is that if Rapapa was senior, I can't remember what the chart is somewhere. I think. If Rapapa was senior to Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua, here it is. No, that's Tanoim. Someone got the Amoraim. If Rapapa was senior to Rav Huna Bar Rav Yeshua, then it would make sense, right? Because you couldn't answer him back. If they were discussing it, that's one thing here. Amoraim, Eretz Yisrael. That's it. Where's Rapapa? Oh, they were contemporaries. That's it, yeah, they were contemporaries. Rapapa and Huna Bar Rav Yeshua are on the same timeline. They were actually contemporaries. That's interesting. Which makes sense, actually. that's why they were named. Yeah, it seems so. Yeah. What was that?
Doesn't follow the mission.
No, that's a different problem. Yeah, it doesn't follow the mission. It's wrong with the mission again. Papa? He owned beer. Yes, made beer. Yes, yeah. They made beer. Whether he actually owned the pubs or not, I don't know. But maybe he sold the bit. He could have been a wholesaler. Anyway, Paradis is a Kerem. Rashi says, he says, I'm 4 amos away. I'm just going through the small Rashis here on Dalef. Shechas Bri Kach Shmoy, that was his name. His name was Shechas. Ashkiche Rapapa found Rav Huna. The Kol Machofa Vakayat Rosh. He was digging and he was cutting down the roots. My high, why are you doing this? He said, Amile Kuli. So Rav Papa said, if Asila Rayas Harbish, I brought him a lot of proof that he shouldn't chop it down. Until I said to him the statement of Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda said, Meitza Shech Zikaboy Rabbim, Osila Kalkulai. A border that the Rabbim have taken hold of, you're not allowed to ruin it. And that Rashi says, Shech Zikaboy Rabbim Nasosila and Derech, to make a pathway for themselves, Osila Kalkulai, you're not allowed to spoil it. Afal Pi Yishu Shel Yochid. Even if it belongs to an individual. I've taken hold. I've got a right to use this. I've got a chazaka to use this. You can't. You're not allowed to interfere with me. After the Papa left, Ravuna said, why didn't I say to him, within 16 amos of the tree, that's a chazaka of the tree. I will but outside 16 amos, ein cheskos chazaka. The chazaka is not a chazaka. Even if the roots spread 25 amos, they only draw nourishment within 16 amos close to the tree. As we say later on in the sugya. And I am outside 16 amos. I'm chopping down outside 16 amos. So that would have been a conclusive argument. He says, but I didn't say that. Now, Tosfos says, if you look at Tosfos Dibur Hamaschel Ad, not going to do all of it, but he says, Tamar, you got that top line? You see that? My Maisi me Rav Yehuda. What is the more bringing from Rav Yehuda to Rabbim Shani? Obviously, the public are different. Whenever Tosfos says Tamar, it means like the world's falling apart, right? It's astonishment. Doesn't make any sense. What was that? No. Yeah, because what's the question from Rav Yehuda? Do Rabbim Shani? The public are different. Obviously, you see that all across the whole Gemara. If you don't say this kasha mas nisin, it's a problem from the Mishnah. The Mishnah Tani Kotze to the Yored. The Mishnah says that you're allowed to cut. So what are you coming along and saying? The public, in other words, it's fundamentally wrong because the public are different. And he says it's like a double question. And if you don't say the public are different, and you say that anyone can use the argument that they've got chazaka, well, then the whole Mishnah falls apart.
Yeah.
Because if you've got roots, you can say, oh, well, chazaka, my roots. Yeah. So then there's no Mishnah. You with me? There's no Mishnah. If you're allowed to chop down root, if you're allowed to say my roots are here because I've got an established use of this, my roots to be here, even if they're under your field, and that's a strong argument, like a public using a thoroughfare or way through, then the whole halach of the Mishnah doesn't exist. Because you're allowed to keep your roots. So he says the Racham Rivom explained the Rabbim Hichziku Rav Huna. The public had taken hold of it, started using the borders of Rav Huna and with his permission. So they had started using that area or the borders of Rav Huna with his permission. Because without permission, their chazaka doesn't help. It doesn't help the public suddenly start using someone's private property. The Rashash changes the word to chazkoson, their chazaka, as it implies in Bava Kama. Okay, so in other words, the public had he had given the public permission. Rav Huna, Breda Yeshua, had given the public permission to use his field or whatever, right? The also Rav Huna, the Kachofa Birshusha Rabbim, Rav Huna came and started digging in the street, because remember he's made this public thoroughfare through his field. He's allowed them to use the field. He's allowed them to cut through his field. Why? Don't know why, but that's what he's done. Okay? And then he came along and started digging in that street that he'd created, or that public way that he'd created through his field, next to the border of Rav Papa, the Kotzat Shroshim de Rav Papa, and he cut down the roots of Rav Papa. You with me? Yeah. That's right now. That's why Rav Papa had a question from Rav Yehuda. So basically, what Tosfos does is he transforms the whole Gemara, this argument, and basically there's very specific circumstances here. You got a field belonging to Rav Papa. You can draw a picture. Martin, every time we use the board, Martin feels good, right? Thing is, I don't know if I can rub out Aisha's up because they're going to go mad. Okay.
For example,
Martin, what are we going to do? It's not big enough. I don't think it's fair to rub this out. It's me tomorrow. You rub this out, they can spend half a share. They can spend half a share rewriting it. I dropped the top. Right, there we go. Very simple. You got Rav Papa has got a field here like this. And Rav Huna Breda B'Shua has a field like this. Oh, Richie can't see. Hold on. There you go. Richie, can see it now? There you go. Right. Now here is this is Rav, that's Rav Papa, and that's Rav Breda B'Shua. Rav Huna Breda B'Shua at some stage in his career decided to allow the public, this is the border, okay? He allowed the public to create a road through fair. Why? I don't know what reason, but he allowed them to have a cut through the field, okay? The public. Now, Rav Papa has trees here, right? And those trees have roots, and the roots are growing, let's say like this. And what he started doing was he started digging, started digging under where the public had started growing. So that was Rav Papa's question. Rav Papa's question was, it's true, I can't do anything. The Mishnah says you're allowed to dig a trench wherever you want, and there's nothing I can do about it, and I can get rid of the roots and everything else. Rav Papa said to him, but not in a public field. You have given that right, the right to the public to use that space. You understand? Yeah. You've given the right to the public to use that space. And therefore, that's not something you can you can't dig there. You're not allowed to dig there.
It's the tick.
Yeah. One second, let's see what the response is. We haven't got there yet. We're going to go through it. This was new about the next line of the Gemara. And that so he says, To give the hardik and that what it says so what was his response? Why didn't I say within 16? This is what he was saying. When Rav Yehuda said a street or a pathway that the public are using, you can't destroy, you can't affect. That is only if it's within 16 amos. Outside 16 amos, you're allowed to destroy it. Because you're leaving 16 amos, which is the size of Rosh Hashanah. It's a brilliant way of learning the Gemara. He says that if the size of the street, if the size of this street is 16 amos wide, you understand? If the size of the street is 16 amos wide, so he said to him, you're right. Up to 16 amos, I can't argue back on that point. But once it's wider than that, then I can, anything beyond 16 amos, if I leave the public at 16 amos, that's the size of Rosh Hashanah. So that's fine. I'm not responsible for anything else. Yeah.
I mean, it's wide enough.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wide enough for them to do. Yeah. I mean, there are other Toras, I think, I see there's questions on this, and it's got other explanations, maybe.
Basically saying that it's nothing to do with that. It's to do with the fact that there's a limit to how much we get nourishment.
Yeah, but he doesn't learn like that. He learns all completely differently, the Gemara. It's nothing to do with nourishment, it's not to do anything. All it is he said to him, I should have said, it's true, that was a knockout argument about the public and the street, but only up to 16 amos. And I could have dug beyond that. It would have been my I could do what I like. Again, it could be that Tosfos changes his mind after this and gives a different shot. See later on, maybe he does. But anyway, that's at least one perspective on how to understand the Gemara. But again, it's totally it doesn't help resolve Rashi. It's a completely different shot in the Gemara. I want to do one more piece of Gemara, not too complicated, just the next bit before the end of the share. If he was digging, another quote from the Mishnah, we said, you're digging the trench, you can dig down, you cut downwards, and you keep the wood. Now, the question is, Yaakov Hadaiva, which means he came from a place called Hadayev. He asked Rav Chisda, Eitzim Shalmi, who gets to keep the wood? It's not clear, it's ambiguous in the Mishnah. We've learned this in a Brisa, I think, or perhaps a Mishnah. If you have roots of a tree. Who?
The Mishnah says Hayachofa, so the one who digs gets the tree.
Not necessarily. You can it does not clear. You're digging the trench, okay? You're allowed to cut down, and the wood belongs to him. Who?
Well, the person you're talking about.
Not necessarily. It could mean v'oitzim shaloi. The wood belongs to the person who owns the tree. There's a logic to say that he owns that wood. They're the roots of his tree.
That's in his land.
It's in his land. That's the problem. I hear what you're saying. There is an argument to be made that the best way to translate the Mishnah is like that, but obviously the Gemara sees it as still being ambiguous. Anyway, the case in the Brisa is Shoshi Elan Shal Hedjed Aboim Shal Hektish, tree roots that are non-holy, right? Not hektish, Aboim Shal Hektish, which are growing into hektish property. Lo nerlin v'lo merlin. You're not allowed to benefit from them. That's midrabanon v'lo merlin, but you don't. It's not osum in our Torah. It's not called meila. Whenever you see in the Gemara this phrase lo nerlin v'lo merlin, it always means the same thing. It means that it's osum midrabanon to have benefit. If it was osum in our Torah, you'd be over meila, right? Which we translate as trespass. We're misappropriating hektish. So right, trespass. There's no better way of translating, but that's what it means, right? Pardon? It's not meila in the Torah. It's in midrabanon. That's right. Now, remember, these roots are part of a non-kodosh tree, but they're growing into hektish property, hektish land. So you can't have benefit from them midrabanon, but there's no issa meila. So the Gemara says, if you say we go after the tree, that makes sense. Why? There's no meila in our Torah, because it's not hektish. If you say you go after the land, why don't you come in meila? right?
It's on the land.
Yeah, it's on the part of the land, in the land. So the Gemara says, but that's not going to help you because you're going to say this is a proof that you have to go after the tree. Amos Sefer, but look at the end of that same Mishnah or Brisa, which says, Shel hektish haboy mishel hedjot. The reverse scenario was where you have a hektish tree growing into hedjot, ordinary land, and the halacha is lo nenin v'lo mo'elin. You kind of benefit, and there's no me'ilah, the same halacha. And that's impossible to understand. You understand? The reverse is the same halacha, right? You have hektish tree, right? Growing into chulin land, regular, secular, non-holy land. The halacha is lo nenin v'lo mo'elin. Same thing. Midrabanan, you kind of benefit, but there's no me'ilah. Says the Gemara, if you go after the tree, why is there no me'ilah? Why is there no me'ilah going after the tree, right? Doesn't make any sense. So, in other words, however you understand this is a problem because, if you say you go after the land, then it should be a problem. It should be me'ilah one way around. If you go after the tree, it should be me'ilah the other way around. But either way, you understand, it's clear that you can't just say, we follow the tree. Because if you follow the tree, then there should be me'ilah when the tree was hektish, right? The Gemara says, midi area, this is the end of the question. In other words, midi area, is it, it's not a proof, in other words, it's not a proof from anything, right?
Isn't the produce is hektish?
What was that? No, the tree itself, the tree was a hektish tree. So you've got to treat the whole tree with kedusha. The question is, what about the roots? Are the roots which grow into a different property, are they considered part of that?
What can you do?
Well, you have to go with the hektish, how you treat it. You've got to go to the hektish, which you can't be makar on the mizbeach. You goes to Bedek Kabbalah, you go to sell whatever. It's got to be used for hektish purposes, for the Beis Hamikdash or whatever. It's kodesh. There are rules about what you do with it. But now, the Gemara basically says now, midi area, we're talking here about roots. In other words, it must be that we're not discussing here, right? You can't infer anything from here about going after, whether they belong to the tree or they belong to the land. It must be totally different. We're talking here, begidulin, haboin, la'achem mekanos skinon. We're talking about growth, that means roots or whatever, that grew after you made the tree hektish, subsequent growth. Because sovar, and the Mishnah holds, ein me'ilah begidulin. There is no me'ilah begidulin. There's no me'ilah with growth that grows afterwards. Okay, so in other words, that's why. That's what he holds. This opinion, and that is why you have. That's why now the cases make sense. If the tree roots are, if the shroshi ilana are not kodosh, okay, they belong to a hedge, they grow into a hektish field, so you kind of benefit, and there's no me'ilah. Because again, it's subsequent growth. So anyway, it's not going to be. It's growing into a field which is kodesh, but it doesn't. The roots were hooked after the tree, so it's not relevant to the kodesh. Although you should still be able to prove the other way around. It's not.
Or not on this?
It's not so much dover shelo bal olam. It's a manda omer me'ilah, which holds ein me'ilah begidulin. Even if you have roots of hektish in a field of hektish. It's worth seeing Rashi. Rashi goes through this really clearly. Let's just see the Rashis. Hadayiv was dimin hadayiv, came from hadayiv. Lo nenin midrabanon, you can't benefit midrabanon. Can you see that? It's about 5 lines into where it gets narrow. V'lo mo'elin im nenin lo mo'al alma lo kochi. You can't me'ilah if you have benefit. You don't. There's no me'ilah alma lo kochi. So we try to prove and say they're not kodesh. The Gemara says no. Midi area is no maskana de kushahi. This is the conclusion of the question. In other words, we try to prove from here, and we're saying that the proof is no proof because of the end of the Mishnah, and the only way of understanding, a way to understand this Mishnah is it's talking about something totally different. It's talking about growth which happens afterwards, right? You can't infer anything about whether you go after the tree or you go after the land. the time or the reason is because these roots they were roots which came after the tree was made kodesh. There is an opinion in Maseches Meila. Ein moelin begidulin, you do not commit Meila with after growth, with growth, even if they are kodesh roots in a kodesh field. Makes no difference. The Gedulin are not part of the story.
The hektish tree that grows apples, those apples are hektish.
Yeah, that may be. That well, Richie was talking about Dor Shelo B'La'olam. What?
Make an animal hektish and it grows.
Yeah. But there is an opinion in Meila, and again, you'd have to look up all the different parameters and ways this work, and the way this works, right? That there is no Meila with Gedulin, with subsequent growth. How that fits into whether things work and whether that's because of Dor Shelo B'La'olam, I don't know. You have to check, come and learn Maseches Meila. But the point is that our Gemora is saying that's the way to understand these two cases, right? These two cases, it's because we're talking about Gedulin. It's interesting that even the first way round as well, there's no Meila. Because there's you have a tree, the roots of the tree was chulin, not kodesh, grows into the next door field. The next door field is kodesh, right? Those roots are not kodesh. It's not entirely clear why those roots won't be kodesh. It must be that you go after the tree, right? It seems to be that you do go after the tree. Except that if the tree was kodesh, if the tree is kodesh and there's subsequent growth, it's not relevant to the kedusha of the tree. So it does seem to still be a bit of a proof that you go after the tree. That's why it's a bit of a problem. It's not entirely clear why it's not such a good proof either way that you go after the tree. But the Gemara says, at least Rashi says either way it's not. He understands it's not a proof. Ravina says lo kasha, that there is no contradiction at all between the two halves of this Mishnah, because one is within 16 amos and one is outside 16 amos, says Rashi. The first part of the Mishnah, which says that you go after the tree, that's if it's within the 16 amma, the radius, because there it gives nourishment to the tree. It's considered hektish. The sefer diktani, it's not. It's considered chulin. Sorry, in that case, because it was a non-hektish tree. But the point is, it's associated with the tree within 16 ammas. The sefer diktani shel hektish boin masech shel hedja. At the end of the Mishnah, talks about hektish growing into a non-hektish field, lo merlin, there's no meila, hainu chutz l'tezayin. You know why there's no meila? Because it's outside 16 amos. Outside 16 amos is not considered part of the tree. So Ravina's resolution of the contradiction between the two halves of the Mishnah is different. First opinion holds that it's to do, why the roots are not associated with the tree, because they grew afterwards. That's why they're not associated with the hektish tree, right? Ravina says, it's nothing to do with that. It simply depends on how close they were to the tree. If they're within 16 amos, you treat them with the tree. Outside 16 amos, you don't. Either way, we have not resolved our question. We have not resolved our question. And that doesn't seem to be resolved here in this Gemara. It's possible the Gemara will come to it. We'll come to it later, or we might find a separate resolution. Yes, I think the Gemara comes back to the Shaila later. But in between, I think it deals with this whole question about how far trees draw nourishment, which we will mitzvah do next time. Okay. Have a good evening. Okay, bye.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, pleasure.